top, and then you crumble some soil in it. Get your hand above this, and you shake the bejesus out of it, right? Okay, so you're shaking it. What's coming out of here are all the fines. Everything bigger than 2 is still in here, so you set that aside. And then you sprinkle out, this is like a cooking show, then you sprinkle out the completed ones, right? And I'm just going to sprinkle some out here. Okay, see those? See how they are so well sorted, right? And looks like pepper. Now they're all the same size, all right? So now I can put them into water. And so if I have a little cap or something, you know, maybe like this, and I'll put some water in them, and then I'll sprinkle them in there, and I'll give them 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And what may or may not happen is, if they dissolve, they're not water stable. They're really prone to erosion. If they just sit there and look at you, they're stable, water stable aggregates. Okay, so there's a big, and I don't like to spend money on it. Okay, and so got some books here. Nigel Palmer's book, that's good. Carrots Love Tomatoes, that's a great compatibility guide, a good starter. Okay, the ideal soil, you can, you know, and there's tons more, right? But these are ones that I just threw in because they're good starters, right? These are the light meters. PAR is the photoactive radiation. That's the light that photosynthesizes. And they have an on-off switch. It's on, off. I love that. I mean, that is my kind of thing right there. And so they do a great job if you're looking at high tunnels and greenhouses. If you're outdoor gardening, you don't have a need for either one. You're already in utopia, right? But when we put a hood over something, changes everything. Everything changes, okay? So pH, you can do the strips, right? I got rancher buddies who walk behind cattle, and when after a cow pees on the grass, they'll swipe it. Should be around middle 6s. They know if that cow is sick before the cow. Okay, so you can do this with soil, 1-to-1 solution with soil. You can do that. You can use a meter if you choose to. You can use a pH meter, but you have to have the buffering solutions as well and the calibration. Okay, so you got to be willing to do those type things, but they work nicely, especially if you're going to do a whole bunch of them, right? So, or you can send it to the soil test to the lab, and it'll be in the lab results, right? So that works. Here, I just want to show you a couple things. Soil aggregates. Okay, soil aggregates are hanging on there. That is building soil aggregates, and that's where they're built. And this is a fibrous plant, and a fibrous plant builds aggregates. Okay, you've seen people stand with a big white radish root. You know why it's so white? It doesn't build aggregates, right? It'll build a macropore. It'll build a big highway down, but it won't build aggregates. Now, what if you put the taproot and the fibrous together in the cover crop? You get the best of both worlds, right? So you start to see that. But it's actually, when it gives off the exudates, the biology consumes it and it builds these aggregates there. It's part of their services, right? So let's just do this. You can come closer. You start to see the fibers in here, right? Fibrous root. So let's just open that up a little bit. I saw, let's see. The tips of these are where the aggregates, where the sugars come out, right there. See how white and clean it is? That one's going to give you sugars. You'd have trouble tasting that one. I've done it, and you can do it, but the corn is much easier. The corn really pops because it's a big plant, okay? And so, and in the vest, this is crumbly, this is friable. That's a 1. That's just really nice. I stole this from somebody a mile or 2 over here. Didn't ask them, I just took it. And so this one is not crumbly. Okay, it's not crumbly, not good. This one has the organic material on the top. This one has an O layer. Okay, that's actually an O layer. So all the soils people would be happy with me on that one. This one is bricks. Some of you take bricks. Especially wine. The wine people. It really wasn't made for forages, etc. Although people use it for that. Okay, but it's to measure the sugar content. And what's the utopia number for bricks where you don't no longer have insects? I think it's 12. Yeah, yeah. So if you're 12 plus, there's probably no insect that's going to bother you because they can't digest that high sugar content. If I have disease, if I have aphids in the high tunnel, I will take my leachate coming from draining out from underneath my compost. I'll take that leachate, I'll add molasses to it, and I'll put it on as a foliar. What's going to happen to the aphids? They're going to move because they can't handle that. So they go to the neighbor. It's okay. It's okay. So Tom Dyksher, we've had him as a speaker also. Who came up with the different bricks levels in terms of insects? I don't know, but it's in his data. Yeah. More than molasses, because that's his big thing is molasses, or one of them. Molasses or some sugar. If I didn't have molasses, I'd just take white table sugar and I'd mix it with it. And I do it with the leachate because it has tons of biology in it, and leaves have tons of biology on them. So biology is inside the plant, outside of the plant, and around the plant in the soil, right? It is the plant, yeah. Okay, so in addition, all kinds of cover crop seeds. When you think cover crops, think of it this way. What don't I have? What don't I have? And in gardening, we usually don't have a grass, right? Because all the garden plants are usually broadleaves, right? So we usually don't have a grass. What builds aggregates? The grass. So what do I plant in the fall in the high tunnel? Grasses, right? Yeah, makes sense. And then the first 1 to 2 months, they harvest the carbon, get it back into the soil, and then because they're fibrous, they put the aggregation back in. And I can farm in there forever, as long as I adjust the pH on those lower beds, because those don't leach. Okay, so there's always a soil feature, right? There's every place you go has their own uniqueness on that. Okay, this is one that doesn't cost you anything to do. This is slake. I like to have a netting to put the soil in. I like to cut the bottom out a bit. Okay, see how that bottom's kind of cut out of there? Okay, and you want a taller glass so you can see the slaking action. Slake means, well, first of all of these PEDs are just millions of aggregates together with glue made by the biology in the plant. Slaking means these soil aggregates are coming off of the PED. That's what slaking means. Okay, so what we do, let's see which way did I put this. What do I got? Healthy? Does this one say healthy? Okay, this one says good guys, so I'll use that here. Okay, and they got to be dry. Okay, they got to be dry. This one's been in the car too long. I'm going to put another one with him. So after you dry them, and that might take a day or two in a windowsill, that might take a little time in the pickup dash, but someplace where they dry, okay? So when it goes in the water is going to come into that PED, and it's going to create a pressure. And if the pressure is greater than the strength of the glues that are left, then you're going to see massive slaking, okay? If they aren't, then it's going to sit there and look at you, right? Okay, so we're going to, would you take this one and put that in? We'll just set them in like so. Yeah. So now the water's coming in. See the air coming out? You see the bubbles? Because we said typical soil is 25% air. Okay, so we didn't lie. There was some air in it, right? Okay, now the water's coming in, creating a pressure. So it's an engineering item. When I do this for engineering groups, they get this one totally, and they start calculating the force and the energy, and you know how they are. And so now it's just a matter of something that I can do to see if my soils are stable. Did I make an improvement? It doesn't cost me anything. I can do it on the pickup in gate. I can do this anywheres. These are cheese ball jars, and yes, I did. If you're wondering, of course. And it can be anything, but you want some height on it, right? You've seen the nice long tubes, you know, those are nice. They work good. You want something with height on it, okay? And so which one would you drink? So it's water stable aggregates, okay? And I think those are really important to have. And so it's something you work toward. You have to have carbon to get there. And so carbon supplies the food, so the sugar supplies the food to the biology, and then the biology builds the aggregates to hold it together. Builds the aggregates on the root mass, right? And then the glues are made by the plant and the biology together to hold everything together. And then you get a stable aggregate, okay? So what else? This one is Solvita. Everything with carbon respires. We respire, plants respire, animals respire, soil respires, okay? The more it respires, the more activity there is in the soil, okay? So you put the soil into the line, shows the line, and then you go ahead, and it's a 24-hour thing, but you go ahead and you put a paddle in. And so these are paddles that secure the respiration that's coming off of the soil, okay? And they're inside these sealed containers. They start out one color, and as they slowly change, 24 hours later, you read them, okay? And then you know what that is compared to another one you did, all right? And you start to see it's just another feature. I've also done these with water. I took rainwater and city water. Which one respired more? Rainwater. It actually has life in it, right? City water, we take chlorine and chloramine because we need it potable, right? So it's safe for everyone to drink. And so rainwater has all of the biology in it, right? So it respires. So, you know, you find your way that life springs eternal, right? Okay, I think we probably need to return to second half of the program. Questions first.
On the slate test,
Yeah.
can you explain maybe the practices on the left one versus the right one?
Yes. So they're both loam soils. They had two different lives. This one's been a monoculture for many years, same monoculture for a number of years. This one has had plant diversity and cover crops. This one's had less soil disturbance. Yeah. Those are the primary differences. And they've each had quite a few years into it. Neither one is a beginner. And so I don't try to change what people are doing. I try to talk about soil health principles and then let them decide the course that's best for them. And I think that's, as humans, it's what we kind of prefer, I think. Yeah, yeah. Oh. Yes?
Can you describe what would happen if you were to put two clay soils in here, a healthy and an unhealthy clay soil?
I think you're going to see something. Now, these are loams, okay? I think you're going to see something fairly similar. Yeah, yeah. Clays are unique, though, right? They're unique, and so many times we're used to, especially clays. We're used to high tillage with clays many times, and I think it takes a tough situation and makes it tougher. And so, but I think you're going to see a similar. I don't usually do it with sands because sometimes they're just too fragile to make that work. They're not blocky enough. Yeah. Loams are generally pretty cooperative in terms. And then also, if you do enough of these, it'll flip. You know, like if I do, say I did 40 of them in a row, there'll be one doesn't turn out the way I think it should. And I'll look at that and go, because it's life and it's differences just in small areas. And, you know, if you do enough of them, you'll have something that doesn't play out the way you thought it should, right? Yeah.
What's your ideal carbon to nitrogen ratio on a cover?
What's the carbon to nitrogen ratio of the soil? Let's start there.
I figured it was system dependent.
Well, carbon to nitrogen ratio, so for every 1% soil organic matter, there's 10,000 units of carbon and 1,000 units of organic nitrogen for every 1% in the soil. If you do the math and factor it down, that's 10 to 1. So now you know the CN ratio of the soil. It's roughly 10 to 1. If you do a soil test and you have that criteria on there, that they did it for you, it'll be 10 to 1, 11 to 1. It'll be right in there, okay? Really close. So now we know what that is, all right? So now you ask yourself, now re-ask your question.
What's the ideal carbon to nitrogen ratio for a cover?
Okay, so if it's too close to 10 to 1, it's virtually going to mean everything on the soil is probably bare. If it's too high, you got a lot of carbon materials laying there that are absorbing a lot of the nitrogen in the decomp process, right? So I like to see something that's maybe 15 to 1 to 20 to 1. What's the ideal compost? I think that's somewhere around, what's the ideal? 25 to 1, 30 to 1, right in there when you're making compost. But on a soil, cropland soil, gardening soil, 15, 20 to 1, those aren't bad. When you get to 10 to 1, you are functioning just like the soil. And then it's interesting to see what's laying on the soil surface, right? To me, that one's a little low. You're really accelerating.
So is a high grass type of situation gonna help much?
So high carbon, what's a high carbon crop? So wheat is 80 to 1. Wheat, oat, barley, about 80 to 1. Rye, about 80 to 1. Corn, it's around 60, 65 to 1. Soybeans, right around 30 to 1. Which of those three are going to decompose the fastest on the soil? Soybean, because it's very low carbon. None of these plants are evil. They all got their own characteristics, right? The wheat's going to hang around quite a while, right? Corn is kind of unique because there's parts of corn that will go so quickly. Then there's other parts of corn where there's higher lignin that are going to last longer on the soil surface. So corn's a little deceiving sometimes. But the soybean's going to go super quick, right? So every plant has a CN ratio. You can look them up. Every plant. I think they might be in your program. On your drive. Every plant has a CN ratio. We've known this forever. Now, the greatest thing about a cover crop is when you put a combination of plants together, you can adjust the CN ratio high, medium, or low. If you want it to decompose really quickly, you put in the lower carbon plants. A lot of legumes, etc., are quite low. If you want it to last much longer, you go to the high carbons. Sedans, sorghums, small grains, all those are going to last much longer. The middle ground is what biology likes. You know, life's a balance, that old statement, it's kind of true. And so you start to see that you can adjust the CN ratio of a cover crop with the species. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. One last question.
On the slaking test,
Yeah.
I guess why exactly are you looking for the larger aggregates that stay together? Is it just resistant to erosion, or does that indicate more glue?
So if you have if you have water stable aggregates, you're going to have more air exchange. You're also going to have more home for the biology because they all live in the soil aggregate, in the pore space. Okay, and it's also the transportation system of the biology moving within the soil, so it doesn't go anaerobic. So it's an indicator of all of these items at the same time. Also in this one that came apart, there's a kind of a film on the surface of the water. What is that? That's the proteins and the glues, all right, that were left in there that held it together best it could. That's what's left. It just pukes that out to the surface then. you've ever driven down a road after a big rainstorm and water's coming off the slope of a field heading toward a culvert, and it swirls at the culvert, and there's a big head of foam there, that's what that is. Because it came off of that land, came off of that soil. Okay? Yeah. Okay, I think we're going to head for the last